So I want to just introduce you to Peggy. Is it Bareh? Peggy, is that how you say it? Bareh?
Peggy
Yeah.
Bareh. Yeah, that's right.
Okay. And now, as you can see, Peggy is the author and founder of I'm Thriving Now, which is an organisation which is about independent domestic abuse. She's a practitioner to help people who have been through domestic abuse. And she's a mum to 3 amazing kids. So she helps abuse survivors who are ready to move from a life of emotional pain into a beautiful life of peace, purpose, and pleasure. And she does that through her unique step-by-step toolkit, which is called I'm Thriving Now, where each letter of the title is a step to unlocking gain in, and in your pain, kind of leaving you with a thriving life. So having lost all hope after a lifetime of abuse herself, she suffered terribly from zero confidence and paralyzing fear of rejection and debilitating depression. So as you can see now, all that's gone, and she hung on to her faith, and she built up courage to leave the abusive relationship and take her children with her. And she went on a 3-year journey of self-discovery that changed their lives forever. And so she learned how to transform her trauma into triumph, creating a unique recovery toolkit, I'm Thriving Now, which unlocks the greatness of every life that this powerful program touches. Peggy, it's our absolute pleasure to have you here, and over to you.
Oh, thank you so much, Jane. It's a pleasure to be with you here and to see all the beautiful, beautiful faces. And yeah, so thank you for that introduction. I'm a mom of, I always start with mom because I know somewhere when especially entrepreneurs who are women go somewhere, they always start with the title, I'm the CEO of that and that. I said, hang on, I'm a mom. I'm a mom to start with, so yeah, I'm a mom of 3 amazing kids, as Jen already said. And what I do at the moment is just using my story and using the gain in my pain to change lives. And I always kind of start with my life 3 years ago, or it's almost 4 years ago, when I walked out of my abusive relationship. I almost died because it is something that when women tell other women or tell people about the feeling that they get when they come out of an experience or an abusive relationship, people don't get it. People don't get it, especially if that relationship was more of emotional abuse rather than physical abuse. So here I came out of the relationship after I mustered that courage to take my 3 children away with me. And I was relocated without choice into Stoke-on-Trent. And I knew no one, I knew nobody. I had no job. I had no money. I had no purpose, no direction. And I had 3 children to feed. And at that moment, I was really just drowning in emotional, when they talk of drowning in that deep pool of emotional pain. And the pain, I talk about the pain of rejection, the pain of low self-esteem, the pain of worthlessness, the pain of loneliness, the pain of self-sabotage, guilt, So all those pain, I was just drowning in that deep pool. I had nowhere to go, nobody to look up to. I remember trying not just to keep my mental sanity intact, but also trying to rescue my children because they were also grappling with that pain. They just left a city, the town where they've always known, and we were in a new town. How are they going to cope? So as a single mom, it was challenging. For me, it was an adventure that I mustered that courage to take, and I had no direction where it was going to. And at that moment, I was reflecting about not just my life at that moment, but my journey as a childhood. Because I turned back, I looked back, and I said, this is not something that is just happening now. This thing has always happened with me from the day I was born. Born as, well, I was branded as an outcast. because I was born out of wedlock. And anybody who knows, for those who are in South Africa, you will know this, that is it's a taboo when a child is born out of wedlock. And so I grew up with my grandmother. I was left at the age of 5. I was left, with my grandmother. So I grew up I knew my mom when I was 12, and I knew my dad when I was 18. So all along, I knew my grandmother, my poor grandmother, living with my grandmother in the village. At the age of 5, I had learned to cook, to clean, and to look after myself. I traveled miles in Hamilton to fetch water before I could drink. I had to do hard labor, work in, scorching sun, weather, heavy rain, because that was the only way of survival. If I didn't do it, I wouldn't be able to buy flip-flop for myself, or even to buy basic items like books, like pencils, basic things just for me to use. So that was just painful. And not just because of that, I was also born with a heart disease. And unfortunately, the heart disease wasn't diagnosed at the time. And so it was deemed as a mysterious disease, because at one moment I was healthy, the next moment I was dying. So I suffered, I spent nearly half of my childhood life in and out of hospital. My grandma struggling to save my life, struggling to just give me hope in life. And it was painful. And so I was rejected in school. I was branded as walking dead. I remember I didn't have friends to play with, because every parent was so conscious for their kids not to play with me, because I was so fragile. I could drop dead at any time, and no one wanted to take the blame. And so I grew up as a very, 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 very lonely child. In school, I was bullied, I was segregated, I was called names. So I lived my childhood life with no self-esteem, with no confidence. I lived as I wasn't meant to. I didn't belong. And so as a way of, even though the medical diagnosis, they tried in hospital, nobody knew what was happening to me. And as a result of that, my grandmother said, okay, I'm going to try another way. I'm going to take her for traditional treatment. And so the traditional doctors, they said, according to their diagnosis, they said my heart was eaten by witches and wizards. So apparently I didn't have any heart. And so for them to give me a new heart, I needed to undergo 2 procedures. The first one was for me to drink animal hearts. And I can still remember, even as I speak, I can cringe, I can feel, as age young as 10 to 12 years old, little girl, I would drink animal heart. So any animal could be slaughtered, whether pigs, chicken, goat, anything they could lay their hands on, they will kill the animal. They get the heart, they rip the heart open, they dice the heart, and then they give me to drink with palm wine. I did that for 1 year, 1 full year, nothing was working. The second one was through incision. So every single day I would get up, stripped, no clothes, just naked as a 12-year-old, and I would get my chest and my hand. Today, when I look at the scar, it just reminds me of those gruesome moments of pain, the pain I went through. And all of that did not work. So fast forward, I managed. In the end, my grandmother had to pursue just to make sure I think she vowed that, she would do every single thing to keep me alive. And that is why I dedicate my book to her, because she did amazingly just to make sure that she gave me hope in life. So in the end, I was diagnosed with a leaking valve. And so I was prescribed extensiline, to take injection every single month until I was 25 years. So I started off the process. We started, I started taking the injection, but it got to a point where the price went up, and me and my grandma, we couldn't afford because we were so poor. And so I stopped taking it. But luckily, I was more or less turning into a normal child. I was more or less healthy at that time. So I carried that mindset of inferiority. I carried that mindset of emptiness, of worthlessness, of, into my teenagehood. And when I got into my teenagehood, I was seeking for validation. I wanted someone to just tell me that, Peggy, you are beautiful. Peggy, I love you. I was looking for something that I didn't get, or I never got as a child. So in the process of that, I found, I had teenage pregnancy. And again, it was a taboo within my community. I remember I hid that pregnancy for 6 months without telling anyone, because I was so scared that my community they were gonna, ostracize me, because they saw it as a taboo. So again, I managed it until I had my baby. And again, that pain, it was all along. It was just one trauma after the other, one pain after the other. And then there I was as an adult. When I finally met my partner, I was like, yay, the pain is now over. I found somebody that I could spend my life with. I found somebody who said they love me. I found someone that I could actually rebuild my life, rewrite my story with. But just at the moment where the relationship was settling down and I was happy, everything was happy, my husband became so abusive. And the reason why, because again, I journeyed with that mindset of passiveness, that mindset of inferiority, that mindset of worthlessness. I lost my value. I couldn't speak. I gave away my voice. I gave away my worth as a woman, and every single day, he was just trampling on me, walking on me like a doormat, and I had no voice. I had no value. I had no strength or courage to stand up and say enough. And so I went through it for almost 8 years until it got to a point where I couldn't take it anymore. Well, I always say maybe it was for me, I would have continued, but I looked at my children. It was actually affecting my children. So on that fateful day, like I said, I mustered the courage to walk out. And when I walked out of that relationship, I thought that was the end of my life, because everyone whom I trusted made me to believe that I was a failure. I was called name. Oh, you're a useless mother. You are a useless woman. You are good for nothing. You can't achieve anything good in life. So I walked out knowing that that was the end of me, because I saw no value. I saw nothing in me, only shame, guilt. I didn't know how my life was going to be. And I looked at my children. I was like, I felt like I was a failure even for my own kids. So coming back to that moment when I was drowning in that pain, of that deep pool of emotional pain, these were all the feelings that I was just drowning over it. I was like, where do I go from here? Where do I begin? I've gone through all of this, through my childhood, through my teenagehood, through my adulthood. Where do I go from? Can I just die? Why can I not just die and just vanish? And I remember one day that I was in the middle of my prayers, my meditation, and I was crying out to God and I pouring my heart to God. I said, God, my name is Nuio. My second name is Nuio, which means there is God. And I was questioning, I said, if there is God, why would God let me to go through all of this? If there is God, why do I find myself in the middle of nowhere, no one to talk to, no one to comfort me, no direction? Why? And that is the moment where, I believe that we all here, we're women of faith. That is the moment where you get an encounter with God and God is looking back at you straight in the eye and telling you that, you know what you went through for a purpose. And God said, Peggy, whatever pain you went through for a purpose. You needed to grow. You needed to develop skills and abilities that will make you unlock your happiness. And if you could just see the gain in your pain, you become the most fulfilled woman on earth. For me, that was a mic drop moment. But the question again, I started asking, I said, but how can I turn the pain into gain? Yes, I've gone through a lot of pain. How can I turn this pain into gain? And for the very first time, for many, many years, I've gathered the courage to go out in search for help. I said to myself, if not for me, I wanted to save my children. I wanted to ensure that let my kids know that it doesn't matter what we go through. It doesn't matter the trauma, the rejection, what the society say, the pain, the agony that we go through. At the end of the day, I want to show my kid that irrespective of what, you can actually turn it around and be who you were born to be. And so I went out in search for help. And one thing that it always caught my attention every time I went out for recovery, you know, sitting amongst other abusive as survivors of abuse like me, there was something within me that many people didn't understand. Every time I opened my mouth to speak about my pain, I spoke about it from the standpoint of strength. I never for once dwell, kind of focusing on the pain, blaming people. I always go back into what is the lesson of my pain? What did I gain from my pain? Every time I started counting, I said, yes, even though as a child, I was bullied, I went through tough time, but I learned how to cook. I learned how to clean. I learned how to just look after myself. I learned. So I always spoke from the standpoint of strength, and it became a motivating factor. I started drawing other survivors, and they will come on to me and say, Peggy, how do you do it? How do you, no matter, even though you've gone through a lot, but every time you come here, you talk with gratitude. I started seeing happiness. I started seeing gratefulness. I was so grateful for my pain. I started seeing the treasure in every pain that I went through. And so most of them started saying, Peggy, we want to know your secret. How do you turn your pain into gain? How do you unlock the treasure of your pain? And again, for me, I wanted to know the solution. And again, God dropped it in my spirit. For you to turn your pain into gain, you've got to move through step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. And it felt like he was giving me every single step. And when I looked at every single step, it came with 14 letters. I am thriving now. Each of these letters is a step towards turning a pain into gain. When we go through pain in our life, when we go through challenges in our lives, how do we turn our pain into gain? How do we turn our trauma into triumph? And in every single step, these are the steps that I took that brought me to where I was today. And if you see me standing before you today and talking, it stands to these strategies that I went through before I could be where I am. Because God knows, if I didn't have that intervention or that rescue from God, who knows where my life would have been. I think I would have even been dead and gone, because it got to a point where, that was it. So it has become my mission, call it my purpose, call it my dream, to help other women, other survivors like me, to tell them that, yes, you've gone through the experience. Yes, you've gone through the pain. Yes, you've gone through all the trauma. You've gone through the nasty, nasty things in life, because this thing called life, people are going to cross our path. Some are going to be good. Some are going to be ugly. Some are going to be so nasty, so nasty. But at the end of the day, each and every one, they leave a footprint in our lives. I don't know whether we want to dwell on the pain. Is up to us. Whether we want to stand up and accept responsibility for our life and happiness is up to us. But for me, I chose to accept responsibility for my life and my happiness, because I said, you know what? Each time I accept responsibility for my life and my happiness, I take back my voice. I take back my value. I take back my purpose. I take back my impact. I take back every single thing that I had given whosoever that came into my life and stole it away. I take it back. And I take it back to say, you know what, now I own it. And when I own it, that is what I've owned. I've owned that life. I've owned that happiness. I've owned my voice. I've built my confidence. I've built my self-esteem. I know my value. I know my purpose. I know now that I wasn't born to suffer. I know that I wasn't born for someone to just abuse me. I know I wasn't born to just waste. I was born for a unique purpose. And just by knowing that, I feel like finally I've unlocked that treasure. I've unlocked that happiness, because just by being with you today, it gives me great joy. Just by sharing a little bit of my story today with you, it gives me great joy. Every time I go out to speak to women or to speak to any network, to share my pain, to gain story, to share my journey, and I see the impact that I leave, it gives me great joy. The joy that money cannot buy. And I feel so, thank you so much, Jane, because I think that the world, the way we see the society now is leaning on us. It is our responsibilities as women to stand up and save not just our lives, to save our children, and to save our generation. Because when we save our children, when we save our lives, because if I didn't save my life, I wouldn't have been able to save my children. And saving my life is about teaching me. It's about letting me learn the things that my mom didn't teach me. I had to go back. If you read my book, I talk about mental rebirth. I had to reborn. I had to go through a mental rebirth where I had to, challenge my limiting beliefs, turn them into empowering beliefs. I worked on my own self. And the reason why I was working on myself is just so that I can able to change my children, because I wanted to break that cycle. And when we break the cycle with ourselves, then we make sure that we empower our children, we empower our grandchildren, we empower our great-grandchildren, and that is how we change our society. And so that is why I feel that as women, the society is looking on us, it's on our shoulders. What are we going to do to change the society? Every ripple at a time. Jen is a drop. Everyone here is a drop of water, and together we form an ocean. That is how we change our society, and that is how we change our world. So I'm not going to talk for too long, because if I want to keep talking, I'll just keep talking and talking and talking. And so I am so grateful for sharing a bit of my story today. And I'm looking forward to another time where I can, of course, share more with you. So thank you so much, Jane. Thank you. Thank you.
Peggy, that was absolutely amazing. What an amazing story. And wow, I really needed to hear that story today. Thank you.